Okay, so there's academic problems up and down in this country, and it's a worrisome trend. Then there's the rest of the country. These are shocking stories. That, for instance, I doubt that many of you know who the people in the top left are. Does anybody?
Mel and Norma Gabler?
Very good. Yes, the infamous Mel and Norma Gabler. These were a pair of fundamentalist Christians in Texas who set up a sort of out-of-their-house textbook evaluation shop. In Texas, it's one of the biggest markets in the country, second biggest after California. And so when textbooks come into the schools, they first have to be approved by the legislature. Mel and Norma Gabler would get these textbooks, and they would go through them, and they would mark off all the bits that were anti-biblical, which meant that any science textbook basically is anti-biblical. It's all against their version of the Bible. And then they'd go into the legislature and denounce it. And this is the shocking thing. The Texas state legislature would listen to them, take them seriously. These are people who had no qualifications at all except for the fervency of their religious belief. And they were dictating the content of science textbooks in California, which meant that they were dictating the textbook content of all books all across the country, because no publisher was going to publish a science book that could not be sold in Texas. It's just too big a market. So that's pretty bad right there. They're dead now. If you're ever in Texas and you find their grave, go ahead, dance a jig on it. It's a good thing. We're glad they're gone. But there will be many more to step in and replace them. The second guy up there, the one with the nice mustache and the grin, that's, anyone know him? Just all these little tests I'm giving you. Okay, that's Don McLeroy. Don McLeroy is a dentist and a young Earth creationist. He thinks the Earth is 6,000 years old. He is also the head of the Texas School Board. Yeah, really, this is the guy running the whole show in Texas. He was appointed by Governor Perry because of his great credentials, which are, well, he's a dentist, yeah, okay. He's never taught a class in his life. He has said some of the most outrageously stupid things. He's slowly eviscerating the Texas Board of Education to get rid of all the people who have any kind of science appreciation. Some of you may have heard of Christine Comer, who was recently fired because she sent off an email mentioning that Barbara Forrest, who's also here in Washington, D.C. this weekend, was giving a lecture on evolution. That was it. They said, okay, you're gone, you're fired. You cannot spread this kind of information, this kind of dangerous information about such a wicked woman as Barbara Forrest around the state. Okay, so she's out. And it's just shocking that this is the man running the Board of Education down there. The third guy on the left, oh, this one, you must know this one. He looks familiar. Yes, Ken Ham, okay. Yeah. Usually there's somebody who mentions Australopithecus or something, but yeah, that's Ken Ham. Now in Kentucky, he's the guy who runs that $27 million Creation Science Museum up there. Yes, he also runs Answers in Genesis. Now this one down here, the Discovery Institute, you've all heard of that one. That's one that's peddling intelligent design. It's an interesting contrast. Discovery Institute gets by on a budget of a few $1 million a year. That goes to a couple of salaries, several salaries actually, and it's also paying for things like fax machines so they can mail out press releases. That's about it. That's what the Discovery Institute is a glorified PR firm. Ken Ham's Answers in Genesis is bringing in tens of millions of dollars a year. It's huge. This is the big one in this country. If you want to find the biggest, strongest, most powerful, loudest voice of creationism in this country, it's that guy running Answers in Genesis. And the museum is a joke. I mean, but still, he's getting hundreds of thousands of visitors every year. Think about that. I mean, these are your neighbors going to this thing, sending these people money, and they're thriving. So this is why I say we're kind of losing here. Okay, and everyone knows the one on the bottom right there. Okay, but fortunately, she lost. Yeah, that's the good news. But seriously, how did she get on the slate? I mean, she's got no qualifications. She's anti-science through and through. In fact, the McCain campaign throughout was anti-science, with all their complaints about, $1 million overhead projectors. What we're talking about is actually planetariums. When he's complaining about, these useless studies of bear DNA, which was actually a Republican-endorsed project in the state of Montana to study the distribution of bears there. This whole campaign has been a horror story for scientists, because we've got Obama, which seems like a good guy. Many of us are all for him. But worst of all is that we're voting primarily against the clown circus that's running on the right. And that's not a good state for a healthy American democracy, is it? That you've got smart people on one side and fools and idiots on the other. We'd kind of like them. We'd kind of like to have a choice someday. So anyway, here's this big political problem. I'm just trying to make the case that we are losing, that this is going on all over the country. We've got NCSE and Americans United doing this great job of defense. But it's not going to do much good if we're guarding the schoolroom door while everything else in the culture is going to crap. And that's what we've got to deal with. Now, what's the root of the problem? Some of you may have read my blog, and you know what the answer is, right? That the common cause of all these problems, Norma Gabler, Ken Ham, Sarah Palin, all of these people, the common thread is religion. That we are not getting much of a problem from radical atheists trying to gut the school science standards, right? That's just not an issue for us. Agnostics aren't a problem. It's just that when you've been fed a diet of nothing but silly lies and myths for your entire life, and you believe in these entirely sincerely. Now, creationists aren't bad people. They've just been told these things, and they believe that for the health of their family, for the good of their children, for their future, they have to push these particular beliefs, that they're leading us into a disaster here.